Hello. Wasn't aware that it's like super blurry, but it's okay. I have to talk about what's it called? Psychology. So now we're gonna talk about psychology, and then I can go to school. Okay, so this test is gonna be about personality, learning, and emotions. Okay. So first, talk about personality. This is a person's characteristic pattern of thinking, feeling, and acting. It is enduring, psychophysical, and dynamic. The psychoanalytic theory, there's a couple of theories. Psychoanalytic theory led by Freud is the conscience and psyche levels. It consists of the id, which is id or something, I don't know, which is impulses of wants, wishes, and desires. It is unconscious and focused on pleasure. Superego is focused on morality, is also unconscious and follows expectations of others. And then ego is the balancing force between the id and superego, focuses on reality, and this is conscious. And it try to use the two using defense mechanism habits, which is repression, which is active forgetting, and then displacement, which is like kick the dog effect, and then rationalization, which is excuses. This whole psychoanalytic theory focuses on human being bad. Now, there is also a theory that focuses on humans being good, which is the humanistic theory, supported by Maslow and Rogers. This is a potential for growth and development and is focused on the hierarchy of needs. So, you're trying to reach self actualization. It believes that the unconditional positive regard and acceptance, also support and unconditional support, absolutely, will equal full potential. The psychoanalytic and humanistic theory are both part of the idiographic approach, which is the focus on individuals. Now, the trait theory or nomothetic approach focuses on different personalities and different people. So there's 5 categories of personality. The acronym is OCEAN. So first is openness to new experiences, which is like confirmation or independent. Conscientiousness, which is disorganized versus discipline. Extroversion, which is reserved versus social. Agreeableness, which is uncooperative versus trusting. Neuroticism, which is calm and secure versus insecure. Now, convergent validity is 2 or more items with an underlying common factor. Discriminant validity is 2 or plus items rated differently, which will equal distinct and unrelated factors. The Big Five has predictive validity, whereas the MBTI Enneagram doesn't really have that. And the Barnum 4 effect shows that we feel like information is pretty receptive as long as it's vague. Okay, the biological basis of personality. So you have the behavioral approach system, which is BAS, the motivation for rewards, versus behavioral inhibition system, which is the BIS, which is the motivation to avoid punishment. The BAS is managed by the left prefrontal cortex, and then the BIS is managed by the right prefrontal cortex. Hormones include testosterone, which will increase aggression and lower agreeability. Oxytocin will raise trust and agreeability. Cortisol is stress. Genes are heritable and environmental. Identical twins rely more on environmentally for like variety than heritability. Similarity is also known as concordance. Strong situations may suppress personality by controlling behavior, whereas weak situations will allow behavior to shine a lot more in personality. Personality is dynamic by selection, such people can choose situations that match their personality. Evocation, which means people can change behavior in response to how people react. And then manipulation, which is an active influencing in order to avoid conflict or gain assistance. Okay, now we're going to move on to learning. There's 3 types: associative, non-associative, and social or observational. So, associative learning. This focuses on predictive relationships between 2 events. There's classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning, supported by Pavlov, is learning that predicts a reaction resulting from a stimulus. So a neutral stimulus is something that causes an unconditioned stimulus. So an unconditioned stimulus is a stimulus that typically causes a response in somebody. And then the unconditioned response is the response to that unconditioned stimulus. So, for example, the neutral stimulus is me, right? And then the unconditioned stimulus is um, I start my stream. And then, wait, give me a second. This is not real. Okay, so anyways, let's just say the neutral stimulus is I will start my stream, right? That's the neutral stimulus. Then the unconditioned stimulus is I start playing really loud music on my stream. The unconditioned response is people are going to write all in the comments and say like this is the worst stream I've ever seen. Like this is really bad. Okay. Neutral stimulus is I started. Unconditioned stimulus is I start playing that loud music. That's an unconditioned response. Now, the conditioned stimulus it doesn't typically cause response, but was conditioned to. So it was turned from the neutral stimulus, whatever that neutral stimulus is. Now it's the conditioned stimulus, and the conditioned response is the learned response to the conditioned stimulus, and it's flexible. So, for example, now that I keep playing loud music every time I start a stream, now every single time I start a stream, people are going to start saying that this is the worst stream they've ever seen, regardless of like because they expect that I'm going to keep playing loud music. Okay. So some things can be easier to condition. So for example, short contiguity pairings. So learning happens faster if the conditioned stimulus occurred shortly after the unconditioned stimulus. Or sorry, if the unconditioned stimulus occurred shortly after the neutral stimulus. Strong contingency pairings. So learning can happen faster with strong relations. If it if it always occurs and instead of like sometimes occurring. Stimulus value of the unconditioned stimulus. There's a high value if the subject cares about the unconditioned stimulus. For example, if you didn't care about having loud music, you wouldn't be responding to it. Novelty of conditioned stimulus. So prior training with the conditioned stimulus may interfere with new training. So like if I had already kept doing loud sounds but not music, and then now I do loud music, people might think that it's better. Like they won't respond as hard. And then biological preparedness. So some of us are biologically predisposed to learn certain associations. For example, food equals illness. So that can help not help but prevent us from learning. Okay, so extension and spontaneous recovery. This is when the unconditioned stimulus is no longer paired with the conditioned stimulus or the neutral stimulus, and then there's the diminishment of conditioned response. However, the conditioned response is not unlearned, and learning focus more right now is on how strong the relationship between the neutral stimulus and unconditioned stimulus is. The conditioned response is not gone, but it just gets weaker. Okay, so there's processes in conditioning. So you have stimulus generalization. So this is when associations are learned and can transfer to other similar stimuli, but they're usually neutral. So for example, if I get scared of dogs, I'll get scared of cats, and I get scared of tigers and whatnot. Stimulus discrimination is learning differentiation between two similar stimuli. So that will be being scared of a dog but not a cat. Okay, now we're going to move on to the second type of associative learning. Operant conditioning, which is supported by Thorndike. So this is the law of effect based on reinforcement and punishment. Positive punishment. Okay, so basically, if it's a reinforcement, the behavior is trying to be increased. If it's a negative, or not, sorry, if it's a reinforcement, the behavior is trying to be increased, and the punishment, the behavior is trying to be decreased. If it's positive, then something was administered, and if it's negative, something is taken away. So positive reinforcement is behavior increased by rewarding somebody. Negative reinforcement is behavior increased by removing something that they find uncomfortable, so like removing a punishment. Positive punishment is behavior decreased by administering a punishment, and then negative punishment is behavior decreased by removing a reward. So the behavior will increase or decrease in addition with a stimulus increase or decreasing. Shaping is a successive reinforcement of a simple behavior to more complex behaviors. So, for example, getting a dog to turn around by first getting it to kind of turn small steps, and then finally it can turn a full circle. Extinction is a reinforced behavior no longer followed by consequences. So, it makes shaping possible. So, for example, like shaping is possible because if the dog turns and you treat it, turns again and you don't treat it, but you make it turn more for it to treat, for them to get treated, then it can, be shaped to turn a full circle. So there's reinforcement schedules. So there's fixed or constant schedules versus variable or random. And then there's also intervals, which is relates to time, or ratios that relate to responses. So for example, a fixed interval is every 2 minutes. Variable interval is every average of 2 minutes. Fixed ratio is every 2 claps. Variable ratio is average every 2 claps. Okay, so partial reinforcement effect for various schedules of reinforcement. So a continuous schedule will there's easy prediction of when the consequence will happen, right? If there's a continuous schedule. Now, if there's a fixed schedule, the subject will start matching behavior pattern to the schedule pattern. And whereas with the variable schedule, the subject will engage with it, like using a continuous behavioral system because it's unpredictable. These schedules are for reinforcement only because punishment must always be consistent. So these are only for reinforcement. So continuous will be easy to predict, and then fixed will be, they'll try to match it to the schedule, and then variable, they'll just try to be more consistent. An applied behavior analysis, or ABA therapy for autism spectrum disorder, this can help because they will identify problematic behavior patterns and help alter them. Opioid addiction happens when the expectation of the um, neural stimulus producing the unconditional stimulus, so the needle will equal getting high. That's not met, so that's when addiction happens. The expectation triggers withdrawal and addiction. The other two types of learning is non-associative learning and social learning. So non-associative learning is how a natural reflex or reaction changes over time. So and responses to stimuli can be measured through a galvanic skin response, which is sweat. So sensitization is the response getting more pronounced with more exposure. So if somebody keeps saying like skibbity toilet riz, and they say it too much and I get annoyed, that's sensitization. Habituation is the awareness but less response with more exposure. So if they just say skibbity toilet riz and I'm fine with it, then I'll know that it's happening, but I'm not gonna like respond. Now dishabituation is noticing an absence of a previously habituated stimulus. So if they stop saying skibbity toilet riz, I'm gonna be like, wait, something's wrong. You didn't say skibbity toilet riz. So that's that. So this is different from associative learning because there's no prediction being made. Social learning is new behaviors learned by observing other behaviors, which is modeling, and then you can also observe and learn operational conditioning. So you can observe the reward and punishment and learn from that. Okay, lastly, we're going to talk about emotions. So emotions are a physiological, behavioral, and cognitive response. Mood is actually a general, long-lasting emotional state without a specific identifiable trigger, whereas emotions are kind of like short-term. Physiological components of emotion: you got the stimulus, then the emotion, then arousal. So there's a couple of theories that kind of show like how this happens. So there's the James Lange theory, which shows that the stimulus will cause the arousal and then it'll cause the recognition of the emotion. Whereas the Cannon-Barr theory shows the stimulus will cause the arousal and stimulus, and then the stimulus will cause arousal, and then the stimulus will also cause emotion in two independent processes. Like they're not related. Now, the Schechter-Singer two-factor theory, the emotion is more than biological, so the event will happen, and then it'll produce like the change in states, and then the initial response will provide info on the significant event. It will increase or decrease arousal, and then you'll see if it's good or bad. Then the cognitive interpretation will help identify what caused the arousal, and then it can be conscious or unconscious. Basically, the context can change the interpretation of a physiological arousal. So it'll be stimulus, then it'll cause the arousal, and then it'll cause cognitive appraisal, and then recognition of emotion. This is the Schechter-Singer theory. This includes salient cues, which are events that preceded emotional experience that may be the cause or help to the emotion. Some things that help, like anatomy, I guess. The prefrontal cortex helps with emotional evaluation. Insula receives somatosensory signals from the body and it's responsible for the body state awareness. The amygdala processes emotion and generates immediate responses. Misattribution is a mistake in arousal evaluation, so something else could have caused response. And then universal emotions, you got happiness, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, and surprise. Ekman discovered that these emotions are learned through socialization, and emotions are more innate, but expression of emotions can vary, whereas the emotions are actually universal. Cultural differences, so there's individualism versus collectivism. Different cultures can find more emotions more difficult. So, for example, Schadenfreude, I guess, I don't know how to say that, is the pleasure in someone else's pain. And then you also got gender differences. So, both genders experience the same emotions, but express certain ones more or less. What emotions do? They can help us make decisions. So, the effect as information effect is opting for things we feel is right. So, we did decide on things based on our mood and our emotions. Learning, it helps us with learning rules and behavior. So positive emotion reactions from our behavior will be reinforced behavior. It helps us with communications. So social emotions like guilt, embarrassment, jealousy, and empathy can help us communicate. Okay, so counterfactuals is like an if only event. So this is emotions that come with imagining alternative scenarios to what actually happens. So this usually happens from negative emotions. So an upward counterfactual is imagining a better outcome. So like if I got fired, right, and I'm like, what if I didn't get into a fight, and that was a better outcome. Now a downward counterfactual would be like, well, what if I got fired and arrested? It's better than getting fired and arrested. I didn't do that. I just only got fired. So yeah. Reappraisal is using downward counterfactuals to feel better. You can always do that, but it also interferes with motivation because you're not looking at like what you could do. You're looking at like you're always looking on the better side. Okay, so motivation is a process or a factor that provides behavior with energy and direction. Energy is the initiation and persistence. It's also not wanting to feel bad, which is avoidance motivation, and then wanting to feel good, which is approach motivation. Um, Now, direction is goal intention and implementation intention. So, depression will lower energy, and then restlessness will be high energy but low direction. Self-discrepancy theory is the goal is not met, um, like somebody's goal is not met, so it'll lead to an emotion, which is often bad, and then it'll lead to behavior change. The drive reduction theory shows that you need a need and a drive for motivation. So the need is the satiated or deprived targets of our behavior. So, for example, survival, achievement, and belonging. And then the drive is the psychological state that encourage behavior. For example, hunger, anxiety, and loneliness. Sorry. The drive is the energy for motivation, and then the needs with habit formation is direction. Homeostasis is the goal for most motivated behavior. So, for example, ghrelin release will equal hunger, and then leptin will equal satiation. Optimal arousal is um, basically moderate arousal, because if you have low arousal or high arousal, it'll hinder your performance. Self-determination theory is includes extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is like an inner purpose and is very effective, But extrinsic motivation, which is from an outside source, can affect it. So, for example, you can want to do better, but somebody threatened you to not do better, on the outside. So you just don't, I guess. Usually, intrinsic motivators are autonomy, which is choice, competence, and relatedness, which is like what you have common with your friends. Okay. Self-efficacy, which is the expectations that one's efforts will lead to success, will help people pursue and achieve more long-term goals. Delayed gratification is a persistence to put aside short-term desires for long-term ones. Okay, now we talk about coping with problems. So you can either have problem-focused coping, which is a priority on correcting past behavior or apologizing, and focusing on future goals and intentions, developing those plans. So implementation intentions. Or you can have an emotion-focused coping, which is dealing with the emotion rather than the problem. This can at times make the problem worse. So, for example, emotional eating, abusing substances, and gambling. Both types of coping have different targets but the same goal: alleviating distress. Suppression is actively trying to forget about a negative event, which could lead to rumination, which is persistently thinking about the negative event. Radical acceptance is the acknowledgement of pain without attempting to cope. Distress tolerance is how much distress you can take before attempting to cope. Suppression, resulting in rumination, can turn pain, which is temporary, into suffering, which is more long term. Radical acceptance can lead to awareness on constructive and proactive steps for a solution plan once the pain is over. Okay, that's it. I can go to school now. Bye.